Morning often feels peaceful for people who have retired. The sun rises slowly, the air is still cool, and the world seems to move at a gentler pace. For some older adults, however, mornings like this can bring a quiet feeling that is hard to explain. It is not exactly sadness, and it is not anger. It is more like a small realization that slowly grows inside the heart. The feeling that the world around them continues to move forward, but they are no longer standing at the center of it. Robert felt this a few months after he retired. For more than 35 years, his life had followed the same rhythm. He woke up early, got dressed neatly, and left the house with purpose. At the office, people knew him well. Colleagues greeted him every morning. Some asked for his advice before making decisions. Others stopped by his desk simply to talk for a few minutes. For decades, Robert never stopped to think about how much that routine meant to him. It was simply part of life. Work was something he did every day without questioning its deeper meaning. But when retirement finally arrived, everything changed faster than he expected. During the first few weeks, it felt almost like a long vacation. He no longer needed to wake up to an alarm clock. He could sit quietly on the porch in the morning with a cup of tea, enjoying the calm without worrying about meetings or deadlines. At first, he even felt relieved. After working so many years, rest felt well-deserved. Yet, after several months, something inside him began to shift. One morning, he sat on his porch, watching the streak in front of his house. Neighbors walked past on their way to work. Children hurried toward school buses. The world looked exactly the same as it always had. But suddenly, Robert noticed something that made his chest feel strangely empty. No one at the office was waiting for him anymore. No phone calls asking for his opinion. No urgent problems that needed his experience. The world that once seemed to rely on him was continuing without him. This quiet realization is something many retirees experience, even though very few people openly talk about it. For most of our lives, work gives us a place in the world. When someone introduces themselves, they often begin with their profession. A person might say, "I'm a teacher," or "I work in finance," or "I'm an engineer." Without even realizing it, our job becomes a way of explaining who we are. When that role suddenly disappears, the question quietly appears in the mind. Who am I now? Linda understood this feeling very clearly. For nearly 30 years, she had worked as an elementary school teacher. Every day, children greeted her with bright voices, calling, "Good morning, Miss Linda." Students came to her with questions, stories, and sometimes small worries they needed help solving. The classroom was always full of life. Laughter, conversations, and the sound of children learning were part of her daily world. When retirement finally arrived, she felt proud of the years she had dedicated to teaching. Friends and colleagues celebrated her career, and her family told her she deserved the rest. Yet, after some time at home, she noticed something that surprised her. One evening, she said quietly to her husband, "It's strange. For so many years, someone needed me every day. Now it feels like no one really does." Her words were simple, but they captured a feeling shared by many people after retirement. The problem is not that others stop caring. Family members still love them, neighbors still greet them kindly, friends still remember them, but the role that once placed them at the center of daily activity slowly disappears. Another major change after retirement is social interaction. Work brings people together every day. There are conversations in hallways, discussions during meetings, and small moments of laughter during lunch breaks. When someone leaves that environment, many of those daily connections naturally fade. David realized this one evening when he looked at his phone. In the past, it was always buzzing with messages from colleagues or calls about work projects. Now, the phone sat quietly on the table most of the day. It wasn't that people no longer respected him. They were simply busy with their own responsibilities. But small changes like this can slowly create the feeling that a person is drifting away from the world they once belonged to. Maria experienced something similar after retiring from her job as a nurse. For nearly 40 years, she had spent her days helping others. Patients came to her with pain, fear, and hope. She listened carefully, offered comfort, and did everything she could to help them feel safe. Her work was exhausting at times, but it was also deeply meaningful. After retirement, life became much quieter. At first, she enjoyed the slower pace. She read books, walked in the park, and cooked meals without rushing. Then, one afternoon, something happened that made her think. She was standing in a line at a grocery store. In front of her was a young mother with two small children who were running around the shopping cart. One of them almost knocked over a stack of cereal boxes. Without thinking, Maria smiled gently and said, "Careful there, you might fall." The young mother glanced back briefly and smiled politely before returning her attention to her phone. It was a very small moment, barely noticeable to anyone else, but for Maria, it revealed something deeper. Years ago, when she wore her nurse uniform, people trusted her immediately. They recognized her experience. They listened when she spoke. Now, standing quietly in line, no one knew anything about her past. To them, she was simply an older woman waiting to pay for her groceries. The realization felt heavier than she expected. Yet, over time, many retirees discover that new roles can slowly appear in unexpected ways. Robert, for example, began spending more time in the small garden behind his house. Gardening had always interested him, but during his working years, he rarely had enough time to focus on it. Now he started planting flowers, herbs, and vegetables with care. Neighbors walking by often paused to admire the colorful plants growing in his yard. One afternoon, a neighbor asked, "Robert, your flowers always look beautiful. How do you take care of them?" The question made him smile. Without realizing it, he had begun building a new identity within his community. He was no longer the busy office worker everyone depended on, but he had become the neighbor known for his beautiful garden and helpful advice. Small changes like this may seem simple, but they help many retirees rediscover a sense of purpose. The truth is that a person's value does not disappear when their career ends. The decades of experience they carry do not vanish overnight. The wisdom gained through years of challenges and achievements remains. Sometimes, what changes is simply the way the world sees them and the way they see themselves. Many people eventually discover that retirement is not the end of their usefulness. Instead, it can become the beginning of a new chapter that looks different from the past, but can still be meaningful. They may no longer hold official titles or positions, but they possess something even more valuable: life experience. And life experience often turns into wisdom that younger generations deeply need, even if they do not always realize it immediately. In the end, feeling invisible does not mean a person has lost their importance. Sometimes it only means that life has shifted into a quieter season, one where meaning appears in new forms, new relationships, and new opportunities to share the knowledge gathered over many years. Even when the world seems busy and fast, there are still many people who can benefit from the presence, patience, and understanding that older generations bring. And sometimes, all it takes is looking at life from a different angle to realize that their place in the world never truly disappeared.